Hello one and all, welcome. In this one we're going to take a look at the concept of an interval of increase and then decrease. So we have here a curve, just the way you see it. Now, by convention you have to define what it means to look at a curve. So how do you look at it? Left to right, right to left. Conventionally we look at it from left to right. That's important. So in other words, whatever I'm about to show you assumes that you read graphs from left to right. So in other words, in that direction. So what is this telling us in terms of intervals of increase and decrease? As follows, take a look. Begin down below, and I'm going to do this. So first imagine y is the value -2, right above my head, -2. And then as we go up the graph from left to right, then as we go up the graph, the next value will be y equals -1. Again, then y equals 0, y equals 1, y equals 2, and then lastly, y equals 2.5. So if you look through that range of values there, you see that it begins at -2, goes up to a high value of 2.5. So clearly the values of the function, which is the y coordinates, are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, at 2.5 itself, at the peak, right here, as you can see, you would stop. And then to mark the first interval of increase, you look down to the x-axis. That's what gets people often. They think because you're talking about intervals of increase and decrease, that is talking about the y-axis. And in a certain sense it is, because you have to know where the y coordinates are increasing, but then after that you look down to the x-axis to actually get the intervals of increase and decrease. So in our particular case, what this means then is the following. Take a look. Look down to the x-axis from the peak. I've drawn a little dot there, empty hole. Okay. Then after that you draw a little line segment or some kind of arrow, and if you look at it very carefully, over here it seems to kind of go off the graph, and it's suggesting that that's positive or rather negative infinity over there. The first interval of increase would be the following. You might say that the graph is increasing on negative infinity, comma, -2.5. Where am I getting these values? Well, the negative infinity, whether it's positive or negative, you cannot actually visualize. So you just have to imagine it, okay? What it's saying is that there are values coming basically from that side of the graph, from negative infinity towards -2.5. Negative infinity gets a parentheses, it's not a value you can reach, and -2.5 also gets a parentheses. Now where's that -2.5 coming from? That's simply the value directly above my head that takes you down to the x-axis from the peak above at y equals 2.5. If you look, imagine you're on the peak and you look down to the x-axis, so it hits it at -2.5. That's where that is coming from. And again, next to it you put a parentheses, not a bracket, because the value itself is not included as part of that first interval of increase. Okay. And why is it not included? If you think about it carefully, it's simply because at a single point you're not either going up or down, you see? So we don't include it for that reason. At a single point is just a single value of y. So when you talk about intervals of increase and decrease, you have to specify an interval, a range of values. And again, they refer to the x-axis, not the y-axis. Now look what happens on the other piece here. The second piece is going to look like the following. So first, it's going to be y equals 2. Then it's going to be y equals 1. Then y equals 0 on the bottom. So if you look through that second piece, it begins at a high value of 2.5, goes down to 2, to 1, and 0. Clearly the y coordinates are getting smaller and smaller when you look at that piece from left to right. So then to get the interval of decrease, you got to look down to the x-axis as follows. So begin at the peak, look down to the x-axis, and then if you want, draw a little segment along there, and it terminates at 0. Now be very careful, because this is the origin. So right above my head is the origin where the y is 0, but the x coordinate at the origin is also equal to 0. And if you look very carefully at that brownish line on either end of it, as you can see, there are holes, not filled in dots, to indicate that the 2.5 negative over here, right here, the -2.5, and the 0 itself, the x equals 0, not the y equals 0, but the x equals 0 would not be included in the interval of decrease. So I would describe this then by saying the following, that is decreasing on the following interval, -2.5 comma 0, and both of them, the -2.5 and the 0 gets a parentheses because those values themselves are not actually included. Now there's one more piece of the curve that we have to study up on a little bit. So that's this one over here. Again, if you look at the graph from left to right, you will quickly realize the following, that that's y equals 1, y equals 2, y equals 3. So clearly that those values, those y coordinates, are getting bigger and bigger on that side of the curve. Then you look down to the x-axis when you actually talk about the interval that you want. So that means the following. It's going to begin at 0, and trace over it kind of and suggest that it goes forever to the right with an arrow of some kind. So then what I can say that is the following, that it's again increasing on the interval from 0 to positive infinity, and again the 0 and the positive infinity both get parentheses, not brackets. Remember that infinity is not a number but a concept, so you can't actually ever reach it. And the 0 itself is simply excluded. If you look very carefully at the origin right here, maybe I can zoom in on a little bit. If you look carefully at the origin here, you see that it's the point x equals 0 and y equals 0. So that value of x equals 0 is not actually included. In other words, as you can see on this piece, on the brown piece, it's 0 with a parentheses. And also on this blue piece here, it's also 0 with a parentheses. And the same thing applies here at that negative 2.5 here. You see negative 2.5 is in blue here, parentheses, negative 2.5 in parentheses, not included. Now, the only thing that is left over is to realize, by looking at this picture, that clearly there are two intervals of increase. So you have to splice those together, put them together in some fashion. And we do that by using U, which is U for union. So, to do that, it's going to look like the following. I'm going to say that it's increasing on, and this is the last piece, negative infinity, comma, negative 2.5, and then you put U, which is short for union. So you're splicing two intervals together, and then it's going to be from 0 to positive infinity, just the way you see it below me right there. So the whole answer would be increasing on this union and then decreasing on negative 2.5 to 0. That would be the answer taken all over. Okay, thanks so much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe. I hope it's helpful. And I'll see you in another video.